Greetings. This is Gwenera. Welcome to The Well. The Well is a chat session of women gathering to discuss a topic that is relevant to all. Tonight, we're going to be talking about the topic of fathers, daddies, whatever phrase you want to insert there. We're going to dig deep and we're going to tell you not just about our opinion, our perspective, our experience, but also some of what many of us combat day to day and are the byproduct of. So I'm going to take some time now to introduce our guest. Janel, you may be familiar with her. She is a team member of Enjoying Life Fully, and I have the privilege to be joined this evening by Zakia. She's hailing all the way from the state of DC. We love that. We love being able to connect virtually in ways that we may not have, so we thank her for joining us. And so we're going to jump right in tonight. We're going to jump right in. And so again, the topic is fatherhood. So I'm going to ask you ladies to introduce yourself, maybe 20, 30 seconds about who you are. And then if you will share with us your fondest memory from between the ages of 5 to 10 with your dad, with your father. Okay, so should I pull back and let you jump in and go first, or should I decide who goes first? The silence, the pause. So since Zakia is the newest guest, we're going to start with Zakia. So go ahead, Zakia, let us know.
I'm Zakia Jackson. As Gwen mentioned, I live in DC. I do work helping faith communities engage in equity, particularly equity work for public education, but also other forms of equity and justice work. And I love doing that, and it is also very hard. Some hard days.
I can imagine. When you use the word equity and education, that is a whole nother segment. So be on the lookout for that, y'all. We're going to talk about that. We're going to bring Zakia back. She's going to be our expert. She's going to be our SME, okay? So anyway, thank you, Zakia. But do share your fondest memory.
I think my fondest memories with my dad between 5 and 10, I'll say, is going for walks with him. And this continued into my preteen and teenage years as well. I just loved going for walks with my dad. And not always, but sometimes we would, in the middle of the walk or at the end of the walk, stop and get ice cream.
Ooh, that's a bonus.
And I know, and I always wanted a waffle cone. And I always wanted like pretty plain ice cream, like French vanilla, something pretty plain, and then sprinkles and maybe another topping. That was my setup. Oh. And my dad would always get a flavor that I found to be really weird. But
Wow. And so I'm going to come back to that in a minute, but I want Janel to introduce herself because I love that memory. And I'm sure it's resonating with many of the ladies that are viewing now. So go ahead, Janel, introduce yourself and a fond memory.
Hi, my name is Janel Harding. My background is in finance, and it's interesting that Zakia is in equity. And I also do financial empowerment for many communities to increase equity. So it's exciting to share this platform with you all. And I'm studying for my master's in divinity, and I am a part of the Enjoying Life Fully team. So my memory of my father, I'm like, why am I drawing a blank on this? But the first thing that came to mind, from 5 to 10, my dad traveled a lot. So when my father would come home, as soon as I heard the garage door, I would take off running towards the door, towards the garage, and I would scream, "Aye, aye." So that was, ever since I was a toddler, that was what it was my word for everything, but somehow when I was calling my dad, he knew I was calling him. So that became his name until I knew how to say dad. So even as I got older, sometimes I would say "aye" instead of daddy and run to the door, and he would greet me at the door and, welcome him home. And that was the first thing that really came to mind.
Awesome. That's such a tender moment and such a endearing reference. Like, we all have these associations or words, sometimes even acoustics that we use for, those that we love. So thank you for sharing that, Janel. I'm kind of puzzled now. I don't think I had anything that specific with my dad, but one of my fondest memories, it actually came to recollection recently. My brother and I was talking about our younger days, and we talked about family vacations. Back in the day where we traveled on planes, but my father and some of his brothers, they all had the same car. And when it was time to go south, one car had all the food in it, and all the other two cars had the luggage. And it was just like the experience of my father sitting up there in that Electra 325 or whatever the name of it was. For those who know cars, that was that big boat. Like, we didn't have seatbelts, we didn't have any of that stuff. I think I sat in the front row half the time, in between him and my mama on the hump, or all, and that gear shaft was on the side. Anyway, too much background. But the reality is that for me, when I reflect upon those years, I begin to think of the relationship we had and his presence, and how impactful it is now. Like, my appreciation wasn't the same then. It was just my normal. But as you mature and you hear other stories or you expose to other experiences, it's like, ooh, I didn't know the treasures that I had that contribute to who I am today. Not pretending to be on any special platform, but I do know that is a significant contributing factor. So me taking that elongated trail, what is a characteristic that has resonated with you through the years that your dad either instilled in you or that you experienced through your relationship with your dad? Oh, I love when you're pondering, because that means I really challenged you in a question. What is your dad most notorious for? Maybe that's another way we could.
My dad was, his full-time work was engineering. He was by nature very much a teacher, and at church and in different areas, he would even work at a community college. Sometimes he would teach. And a part of his teaching method, if you will, was to be provocative and to have people.
Okay, remember, y'all, I know Zakia a little bit, so at least now I know where the origin is. Sorry to interrupt your story. Just note to self, all y'all watching, note to self. We know where she gets the provocativeness, if that's such a word.
I got a double whammy because my mom is that way too. But my dad was he would provoke, and he would also want us to ask questions. He was not the type who, at least in this context, he did still say "'cause Daddy said so" in plenty of other contexts. But
we should talk about that. I'm coming back to that.
But in terms of like helping you understand the Bible, or helping you understand math problems, or helping you understand even how to be a better athlete, he really wanted us to ask questions and to debate and to dig in. And so I think I just really appreciate that in my household it was healthy to engage in that way about what we didn't understand.
That's awesome. That's affirming. That leaves room for exploration. That leaves, for learning outside of the typical context.
Yeah.
So, wow, that speaks to why you are in pursuit of learning consistently, like you are, Zakia. So thank you for sharing that. Okay, Janel.
Can't follow that one, but what came to mind? Two things. I was trying to find the words for it, but he instilled education, and also I think something I got from him, I don't know if he necessarily said it, was how to reinvent yourself, or how to reinvent yourself, how to just make something out of what you've been given. So my dad actually did engineering, but then and then he worked his way up, became a director, but then during that time was there was a recession, and he got sick, and he was doing a lot of work for the church. He created a charter school with the church. He was always kind of like working on projects. He was always the man behind the scenes, making people develop and things like that. And so even as I was growing up and making decisions in what I wanted to do, in the back of my mind, it had to do something with serving people, and, you know, still making a life for myself, because he wasn't playing with that. And so I think I definitely followed in his footsteps in that way.
Oh, awesome. So I hear both of you inadvertently talking legacy. You're talking, Janelle, about reinventing and how you saw your father demonstrate that. I'm sure unintentionally. He was, by definition, being a good provider, a good father, but you were able to extract that reinvention of self, or being able to support the community, even in absence of maybe what we would now consider his mainstream, or what, you know, what would have been his career track. And then with you, Zakia, hearing you talk about your dad's legacy of how you now are a representative of him in how you discuss matters and how you approach matters and how you defend and how you even educate. So we're talking about legacy here, you know, the significance of dad in building legacy in us. So I'm going to read a short definition to you by a pediatric association that defines a little bit of father. Fathers, like mothers, are pillars in the development of a child's emotional well-being. Children look to their fathers to lay down the rules and enforce them. They also look to their fathers to provide a feeling of security, both physical and emotional. What jumps out to me is the feeling of security and the child's emotional well-being. For many years, probably up until recent years, I don't believe there was a lot of context or maybe even research around the emotional well-being of children being associated to the father. And so now we know there is a significant highlight of the necessity of the presence of the father. So I think the three of us have already acknowledged that we had a healthy relationship with our fathers. Our fathers were present. So it's going to be very hard for us to talk about what absence will look like. And I want to say that for the audience that's maybe viewing, we don't have a representative of that. And so we do extend to you, you know, opportunity to go into that dialogue. If you're interested in having that discussion, we welcome it. Get you on, you know, we'll have that discussion. But from our vantage points, from our experiences, we can't speak to that. And we do want to honor our experience and what we know to be true. So just acknowledging that for those who this may even, you know, cause a little bit of a some type of emotion to arise, or may be a trigger for you, just to know that that's not our heart and that's not our intention. But when we talk about the child's emotional well-being, if you could kind of put your finger on something that your father contributed to for your emotional well-being, as it may resonate or reflect with you now as an adult, maybe your teen years. I know for me, that's when it became most significant. What factor, what attribute, what experience can you put your finger on that say your father contributed to your emotional well-being?
I would say, especially growing up and in college, for emotional well-being, even though I was outgoing, but I believe I'm still a sensitive person sometimes. And my father, I could call him for some topics and start, you know, blabbing about whatever it was that happened, and he would automatically, you know, and generally some men get very defensive over the women in their lives, and he'll, Janelle, don't worry about it, you know, but when he said it, it would sound so simple. It wasn't, you know, he might be just, you know, telling me to get over it or something, but it was in a sense that he cared. And then he would, you know, go on a rant, you know, telling me about life and how you can't control people and blah, 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 you know, but I still have that ringing in my head, like, you know, don't worry about it, or, you know, and he'll simplify it for me. Also for emotional well-being, I know he has my back. Even my dad and I bump heads all the time. We don't agree on everything, but for my safety and security, even physical security, he was always put himself in charge of that. Now that I'm older and I'm married, it's a little bit different, but I still see little glimpses of him still wanting to protect me. So I definitely think that he played a very strong role in, if even, now if I needed to call him, it's a little bit different, but he would still, help me to see a little clearer when I'm in my feelings.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. That's real. When I heard you speaking, I thought of one of the things that I found comfort in was my dad. So it's interesting, this definition. Let me preface this a little bit. Is that by this definition, fathers are the security, lay down the rules and enforce them. In my household, that was my mother. My father was more accepting and tolerant and approachable, not taking anything away from my mother, but it was maybe they had role reversal before role reversal was even acknowledged. But certainly, so that as you were speaking, I was hearing hints of that as well. When you said you could call your father up during your college years and have a conversation, and he kind of approached it with some jest, but also some comfort. He gave you that peace. He offered a solution that was palatable to you. It wasn't like, oh, go do just get over it, Janel. And like you said, it may have been easier said, but it was what you needed, and he knew from an emotional standpoint that's what you needed. So awesome, awesome. Okay, Zakia, do tell.
I appreciate, Gwen, the space you gave just before you asked the question, that not everyone had their fathers growing up with them, or not everyone has a strong relationship with their dad. So I want to say, for me, definitely 1,000% a daddy's girl. And also, yeah, I have 2 sisters and 3 brothers, and my dad was not the same person to all of us. And
next segment, keep going.
Yeah, as a daddy's girl, that has been really interesting for me as an adult to come to understand that the way I felt cherished, genuinely cherished by my dad, is not how everyone felt, right? And that doesn't have to diminish my experience, but it does mean that I need to accept the imperfection of my dad and accept the humanness of him, and even grieve it that he was not able to be what I know he's capable of being to everyone, right? And so that's just been an interesting and in some ways sad thing to reckon with as an adult. Genuinely not a like, oh man, he's awful. More so like, I'm so grateful for him. He could have been a lot better.
Right.
Some other family circumstances in our life. So I just wanted to contextualize that. I think that's an important thing has been an important thing for me, and perhaps could be helpful to some people who are listening as well. The humanness of parents and the humanness that they get some things wrong,
So thank you for that, Zakia, because that's a reality. So I'm going to acknowledge that my relationship with my father was was healthier in my early years than it is in my adult years. Now, there's a lot of contributing factors. My mother's deceased. I learned that my mother was the nucleus. She was the glue. As great of a father as he was growing up, there was a redevelopment, invention of himself that became necessary. That in his humanness, he may not have had the capacity. So even now, you all are helping me give him some grace, even in this season. So thank you for that.
I have to agree with Zakia about, I'm definitely a daddy's girl, but growing, especially from my teenage years, and even now, a few times my dad had to look at me and be like, "Is this my child?" Because once I started to seeing the humanness in my father. He also taught me to speak up, but I think he taught me not thinking I would speak up to him. And
you missed the boundaries of that, right? Like, with everyone else.
I actually had to flip it on him one time and I said, Dad, you told me to stand up for myself, and blame it on yourself. You shouldn't have taught me how to stand up for myself. And he just looked at me and just shook his head. But you know, once you get older, you definitely see your father's flaws. And my dad and I had to have some very real conversations. And that transitioned our relationship to where he had to respect me back, and in a respectful way, but it definitely had to transition, and I had to grieve some things of, you know, when you're little, you have this one view, and then you're like, you know, he's a man, he's human. So I just wanted to add that note.
No, thank you, Janelle. Thank you. I appreciate that because I believe growing up, we don't have trouble seeing our fathers as our superhero. So when this definition talked about the security and protection and emotional well-being, we may not have used those terms or associated it when we were younger in that definition. But for many of us, Dad was superhero. You know, we saw him in this glowing light, and as we matured, the humanness came out. Whether it was our own experience or others around us were aged enough, and we were aged enough to have those conversations, those real conversations about, okay, this is gonna sound a little quirky, the different shades of Dad, you know, the different, you know, the different shades of who he is in the different environments of which he's called to be his manhood or whatever. So when you think about your dad, whether we're married or not, much has been said that we look at some of those very characteristics in those that we date or potentially want to marry. Have you seen that correlation? And what are some of those characteristics, values that you want or have, in your case, Janelle, your significant other, your spouse, your mate, to exhibit similar to your dad?
I'm glad you missed the face I made. Hopefully you didn't catch it on the video. Yeah, so yeah, even dating, I found myself, you know, wanting to see a little bit of my dad in those things. And so for my husband, I think he did represent some of the things my dad represented to me. And in my marriage, I do, well, I'll tell you a joke, like, for just to simplify and to lighten the conversation for a second. When my husband and I got married, we didn't live together, so we weren't, you know, driving together or anything beforehand. So when we got together, I automatically would just go to the passenger seat. And he was like, so you're just not gonna drive? My dad always drove. Well, you know, if it's my dad and me in the car, daddy's driving. So I had to kind of shift my expectations a little. But even in that sense, you know, I do want in my husband a man that is automatically going to want to protect and provide. Even if, you know, I work full time, I'm a strong woman, it's still, there's something inside of me that's like, you know, that's just how I grew up. And even if you didn't grow up with a father in the home, you know, some women still want that. And you know, my dad, when he did things for himself, he also included us as well. Making, you know, if you're going to pick up a meal, you include all of us. You don't come home, you know, with a meal just for yourself. So those traits, you know, I want and have in my husband. And as we grow together, he had to realize some of my expectations. And, you know, you grow and develop from that.
Awesome. Good stuff. Good stuff. I love the joke, if you will, about how normalized your behavior had become, and that you recognize there had to be a little bit of change, that adjustment that had to be made. So thank you for sharing that. I know that's personal, so thank you for sharing that, Janelle. All right, Zakia.
Yeah, I think two things really stand out to me, and that is presence and listening. My dad was good at listening to me. I didn't always like what he had to say. Once he was done listening, we would argue a lot, but not in a contentious manner, right? But then also presence. My dad when I was in high school, I think, and middle school, lived about 2 hours from where we lived with my mom. And he made every single game and sporting event that
Wow.
I ever did, which was more than plenty of parents who lived in town.
Right, exactly.
But
Yeah.
if he missed one, I just can't remember, right? Like,
Mhm.
so he was really good about showing up and being present, and communicating care in that way. And he was also good at listening and letting me speak as long as I needed to get out whatever I, needed to get out, right?
Okay, okay.
Except for when it had to do with talking back. That's another story, though. But
I'm hearing that in both of you.
There's a
Was,
line.
was that a
There's a line.
prerequisite to joining tonight? Was that the unknown prerequisite? But it's something about the father-daughter relationship that I'm going to acknowledge there's comfort in that space, in that relationship, for you to learn the advocacy for yourself, to learn how to stand up for yourself, for you to command and stand for yourself a little bit. I can even remember that with my dad as well. It looked very different with my mother. But with him, I can remember there are times we'd be joking around, and I know I probably crossed the line. And he kind of let it slide. He used it as an opportunity to be like, okay, that's a little far. But so I appreciate that. I've appreciated that again as I've matured, and now that I have 2 younger daughters, just what it means, Zakia, to be present. That is so significant. Present doesn't necessarily mean residing, because sometimes you can reside, and that can be so dysfunctional and unhealthy that it would be in everyone's best interest that not everyone cohabitated.
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing that, both of you. So we're going to try and wrap up a little bit. We always get into these discussions, and it just feels like the time passes so quickly. But because Father's Day is approaching, did want to give you an opportunity to tribute your father. And whatever method you want to use, whether it's just a word of affirmation over fathers out there, including reference to how your father was. If you want to do encouragement, if you have that gift to just pop off a spoken word right now, knock it out. Or if you got that gift to sing and you want to bellow it out, whatever. But I did want to create space for you to send out this energy of positive fatherhood, because we know we oftentimes experience and hear and see the opposite. And so here we come together as 3 women of color, different, didn't know each other until our adult years, and are positively reflecting. I'm going to say I'm enjoying the journey back, if you will, and the reflection back of my childhood and the significance of my father in my life and how it has contributed to who I am today. And so I want us to be encouraging. I want us to speak to our brothers, to our fathers, to our grandfathers, to our uncles, to, any of those men around, even those that are being community fathers, those that are being fathers in the church or in whatever their faith-based organization is, to just speak some edification and encouragement, and for them to know that we support you, we love you, we thank you, we appreciate you, and we see you, like we see you, okay? So just gonna reserve space for you to offer whatever you feel compelled or feel led to do.
I think that I would speak to 2 groups of people really directly. One is people who have lost their fathers.
Yes.
And who are grieving that loss. Last week was the anniversary of my dad's passing. He died in 2007 suddenly. And so I just want to offer love and encouragement to people for whom Father's Day is a challenging day or is a layered day, if you will. You may have lost your father to death, as I did, or there may be a loss in relationship in some other way. So I just want to honor your grief and honor your pain, and say that we all grieve in different ways, and that it is appropriate to find your way
Yes.
One thing that I do is to share stories a lot when I can. I love to tell stories about my dad. Sometimes I get a cake and invite a couple of people over that I have a good relationship with, and I just share pictures. That might not be your vibe. Something else might be your vibe, but just an encouragement to be free in how you want to remember your father. And then the other thing is just two fathers. Whether you're an uncle dad or a dad or find yourself fathering in other ways. One thing I wish for my dad is that he had allowed himself more imperfection and that he had allowed himself more freedom to be human. I think, like, compassionately looking back, I wish that for him. So I do want to say there are ways to appropriately let your children know that you're not perfect.
Yes.
Your children are not your best friend, so it's not the same as like speaking to a peer, but it is good for us to know that you can't do everything. That helps us when we become adults a lot.
It
And
does.
also, particularly Black men, like there's just so much pressure on you, and it's okay that you're not perfect. Be accountable, be free. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you, Zakia. Your pointed expression was necessary. So I'm so glad you went there, and that your words were just so graceful and touching, and met people, I believe, where they are without even knowing who's viewing. I just felt like it just met viewers where they are. So thank you for that. Thank you for opening up about your dad and the imperfection piece. That's serious, because again, it goes back to that superhero. We see them as all being, and it begins to qualify for us, later in life, the measure to which, we hold not only other men, but again, prospective men that may play significant roles in our lives. We use that as a measure.
Girl, we can talk about that.
We only but we will make this a part two. We can certainly make this a part two, because it is something that we don't talk about. We do talk about mothers and daughters. We do talk about that at a whole different level. And it gets a lot of airtime. So I'm committed to having a part two on the DAG, and then maybe that way we can make sure we have some other women with different experiences, so that we feel well represented, well rounded. And not to say we aren't, because as I'm listening, we are all coming from different, vantage points. So, but it doesn't hurt to expand those views and those lenses. So, all right, Janelle, I took up a little bit of time. Sorry about that.
Okay. I love that you said be accountable and be free. Two things. I love my father. My father, we've had our ups and downs, but I am grateful for my father. And I was blessed with a really good godfather as well. And I think about a lot of the fathers and new fathers out there, and I reflect on my dad's history. My father he's in remission from cancer.
Oh, thank
God.
God.
And as you talked, I'm glad you brought up being human, because this is a different train of thought, but similar. Growing up, you have a father that's your superhero, but there's so much that as a man, as a Black man, that can go through a man's mind, and let alone having to be everything for everybody at the same time. And so I'm grateful that my father learned a way to manage it, and I could tell he was in his head a lot, with trying to provide, trying to protect, so presence is a little bit different for me. But as I watch him, he became, he started a help group for people with cancer. It's interesting. I see people pass away, and sometimes I wonder, like, why you kept my father. And so I stopped asking why, and I just recognized that, he's really kind of giving a lot of people purpose, encouraging people. But I'm rambling, But I know only half the struggles that go on in his mind, questioning his mortality every day, a lot of people, he's a godfather to many people, just a lot of responsibility on his shoulders. And if any man has half of that load on their shoulders, I commend them. And just knowing how my father did it, I want them, each man to continue. And, for if mostly women watch this video, maybe reflecting on the father or, child's father you have in your life, and consider what they're struggling with, and being there with them can help draw you closer, or giving them that space to breathe while still remaining accountable. I'm just so grateful for my father, and when I think about everything that he's gone through, I'm just grateful. So.
Oh, thank you, Janelle. You hit on, we just have to have another segment. When you were just referencing those women who have the fathers of their children in their lives. And we hung out a little bit on the emotional well-being, but as you were talking and reflecting on the load that your father was carrying, and if another man has to carry half that, and with Zakia, when you were mentioning your experience with your father, and maybe when the humanist came out, you saw differently or heard differently from others. What about their emotional well-being? How were they able to maintain such a good front? Because we all know every day we're not at 100. So whatever that looked like for them, whatever coming to reality with having to combat cancer, Zakia, your father having to commit to participating in your life that way. There was sacrifice in all of that. So when we talk about emotional well-being, our emotional well-being as, the daughters, but I would love to have that conversation even next time about their own emotional well-being. Like, what did we see in that? Were we able to see some of those times where they had to pivot? I heard you talk about it a little bit, Janelle, with your father, having to shift his focus from his career to maybe more community and things along that line. So this conversation, I believe, is just going to be a spark for more conversations that happen either here on The Well or in the homes and minds and hearts of our viewers. So I want to thank both of you ladies for allowing us a peeky into your lives, into your childhood, and even into your current, how this is still resonating with you and how it is still contributing to you being the women that you are today. So look forward to connecting with you again. The Well, we're on YouTube, and we're on our website. So please, catch up. Many episodes are there for your viewing, but this one was on fathers, and we're just going to say, in anticipation of Father's Day, we appreciate you. We love you. We thank you. We know you are striving to be your best, and we just want to believe that you will be honored in the way that resonates with your soul and with your spirit. So we thank you. Have a good night. Have a good week. God bless you all.